Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wheel to Wheel podcast brought to you by AbsoluteMotorsport.com and the Ally TV network. I am Joshua Sutil, and joining me today are two Jameses, James Casey and James Baker.
Hello.
We're going to be reviewing the 2018 Formula One season. So, where better to start than the reigning champions, Mercedes, coming into 2018 looking pretty dominant and possibly still, yet again, the favourites. Starting with you, James Casey.
Yeah,
How do you see Mercedes this season playing out?
yeah, I think they are still going to be the team to beat. Obviously, they had that challenge last year from Ferrari, who probably did have an ever so slightly quicker car over the course of the season. But when Mercedes really got their car working last year, they were still the dominant force when the car was working well for them. They described their 2017 car as a bit of a diva, and they're a lot more confident, I'd say, from the stuff that we've been hearing so far this season, that won't be the case again in 2018. So yeah, I'm thinking that Mercedes are going to be the team to beat, but we know that there's going to be stiff competition from Ferrari and Red Bull. We would imagine will join the frame as well this year. So a tough challenge for Mercedes to take their fifth consecutive title, but to be honest, I am backing them to at least take the Constructors' Championship, and I'd say that Hamilton is probably, for me, my favourite in the drivers. So yeah, I'm thinking that they can do it again.
Yeah, really trying to chase that kind of Ferrari record, of course, from earlier in the century, and there are, I think, quite a few similarities between those two kind of eras so far. If you look at kind of 2003, 2017 as kind of parallels, they were both obviously very closely run years, and then 2004, of course, was one of Ferrari's most dominant years. So yeah, let's wait and see what happens to Mercedes. Talking of their rivals, James Baker, who do you
Mhm.
think will be the biggest one between Red Bull and Ferrari?
I mean, it's a tough one to call, but like we said last season, Ferrari were, as stated, probably did have the better car. Probably, to be fair, at times maybe even the better team. If you kind of view the way a lot of people were criticising Mercedes of not, having that standout number two driver. Ferrari had that, so they allowed Vettel to really mount a challenge and keep Raikkonen kind of under tabs, which was so prominent, and we saw that so much in Hungary, which was probably the biggest turning point, one of a big turning point, I'd say. But as the season gradually went on, of course, we saw the downgrade of just. I think the Ferrari must have just used all of its reliability. It seems at the very start of the season, and it just shattered away towards the middle part, and really the peak, the biggest point of the season. But as for this year, they can, iron out those issues. There's no reason I think why Ferrari can't win this championship. There really isn't. And to be fair, we question Red Bull. Red Bull seem to be always there or thereabouts in testing, and they always do seem to come up in recent years, definitely towards very well at the end of the season. They actually need to start well this year, I think, in order to really go for it, because I think there's no question their drivers are, two of the best, if not the best drivers in the field. But they've just got to really kickstart their seasons they mean to go on. They can't fall behind off the start, because it will cost them, and it has done in previous years. There's no reason why that won't happen again.
And speaking of drivers, Casey, let's just talk a little bit about Valtteri Bottas. What does he need to do this year to keep his Mercedes drive for 2019 and beyond?
Yeah, that's going to be a big talking point as the season goes on. Obviously, we know that Vettel is going to be staying at Ferrari, and it's very likely that Hamilton will be staying at Mercedes as well. And there's lead drivers at each team, but the second spot at both those teams are up for grabs, and that's going to be going on throughout the year. Bottas, I think, has he's got to be taking points off the other guys around them. So if, for example, Hamilton is finishing in P1, then Bottas has to be beating, at least on the podium, beating the Ferraris and the Red Bulls. If he's not, if he's just running around near the back of that top six, then he's not really any use to Mercedes. And if Ocon has a season like he did in 2017, then I reckon that he will be promoted into that Mercedes seat. So I think for Ocon, yeah, he's got to be helping Hamilton in the Drivers' Championship. I don't think he necessarily has to challenge for it himself. I think Mercedes like to say that they give their drivers equal billing, but when it really comes down to it, I think they don't really mind if one driver would go off with it. Bottas has just got to be seen to assisting the team in both of the championships, and by doing that, he's got to be consistently beating the Ferraris and the Red Bulls.
Esteban Ocon, of course, is one target that you mentioned as a kind of candidate for potentially replacing Bottas. Daniel Ricciardo is another name that has been kind of floated around. James Baker, what do you make of this Red Bull fight between Ricciardo and Verstappen? And do you think that's probably going to be one of the main subplots? As in, kind of, is Ricciardo going to stay, or is he going to go?
I mean, for Red Bull, it is a massive. This year is a big old contractual. It's just a hoo-ha. Who knows where anyone's going to go? A lot of rumours are swirling though as to Ricciardo will sign a contract, and we saw at the end of last season with Verstappen. I think it's not so much a case of Ricciardo wouldn't want to go to Mercedes. It's none of this kind of thing, because that's quite an obvious answer, I think. I mean, any driver at this current moment would lay hands on a Ferrari, a Mercedes, and they would go. I think the trouble for Red Bull is I think they've got to find the progression of actually going on to Carlos Sainz. How much can he progress at Renault? Because he's still got that contractual obligation with the Red Bull program, if you like. So he needs to really prove himself this year, Carlos Sainz, and if something happens, something else will happen, and this will be the end product. It's very not very systematic at this current moment. There's no real order to how this is going to play out, but I think it's going to be interesting to see. You're right, but it's also, I think Red Bull has been, again, they're another team that, recent years haven't really shown it, but definitely we have seen in the past they do favour a number one driver. They've had Vettel ahead of Mark Webber for so long, and that's what people thought would happen between him and Ricciardo. Never really happened. The trouble, I think, with Verstappen and Ricciardo is they're so kind of similar in terms of kind of pace. I feel like that's a very nice lineup to have. Like they're two very, very good drivers. But I would never favour one of those guys over the other, because they are, either one of them, given the chance, would take that championship, I think, hands down, to be honest. I can't really... I don't know. I don't really know what to say about it, but it's all about the contractual obligations of whether Ricciardo does decide to go to Mercedes. All this, of course, does, we've got to play into the question, Bottas has to kind of have a bad season or for any of this to sort of kickstart and go on, and contracts need to be signed. So who knows?
Yeah, I think the best driver lineup on the grid is a good way to describe them. I think Red Bull, it's going to be a big year, isn't it, for them? I think, as you kind of alluded to, they're going to be dominating the headlines, not only because Ricciardo is going to be kind of possibly looking elsewhere, but also behind the scenes as well, and kind of what power unit supply they're going to choose. They've got to kind of decide on that by apparently May. They could be, of course, going to Honda, which seems quite a likely option now, seeing as they've kind of almost burnt the bridges with Renault. So that's definitely going to be a big talking point. Do you think that's silly season is once again kind of dominate, but possibly more so this year than other years? Throw in Kimi Räikkönen as well into that.
Yeah, I think with regards to the Räikkönen question, that's something that pops up every single year, isn't it? And it's just year on year, keeps on extending, and with that, I really think this will be Räikkönen's last year, but obviously Ferrari seem to leave it quite late, so that'll be, as you say, that'll be a real silly season, one that drags on as usual. With regards to Red Bull's engines for 2019, it is going to depend, obviously, on how Toro Rosso do with Honda. But so far, all I've heard from both Toro Rosso and from then, obviously, Red Bull in response is positive things about Honda this year, which does suggest that Red Bull are at least eyeing up seriously this move to Honda for 2019. So it will be crucial to see how Toro Rosso do, but if we go from what testing has been like, then I think Red Bull are going to end up with Honda engines in 2019, and that will develop over the season, but I think that could happen, and speculation is going to be going around all over the place up until that May deadline that they've been given.
Yes, I completely agree with that. Fortunately, we won't be having any speculation about who's going to be supplying McLaren for the future, at least in the short term. Obviously, after 2021 is a different matter. But for now, we know they've got Renault engines for this year. Hopefully, a bit more reliable. But of course, based on testing, that was pretty woeful for them. So James Baker, they kind of come into 2018. Would you agree on the back foot?
I mean, I don't know. I don't really know what to kind of think about McLaren because I think possibly, I think the pace might actually be there. I think there's something about that partnership at the moment that there maybe is a false assumption. Yes, they haven't had a great testing. The test wasn't fantastic. Far from ideal, to be fair, when you get all these people saying how Toro Rosso and Honda and all this, who are like just a load of almost conspiracy. It's not, but I mean, McLaren, Renault, I'm sure it'll find their feet. In order to judge McLaren, I think you've just got to judge them off the other Renault teams, of course. Not so much the other manufacturers. I think you just want to see what they're like compared to other Renault cars. For now, I think they'll be okay, but they cannot. I genuinely don't believe they'll have as bad a season as what it was last year or a few years before, like 2015. So they've got the drivers. I feel like Q3s are definitely going to be their target. They were last year, to be fair, but this year I think it's a little bit more realistic. You're right. It's just how can they hold that Renault engine? They've got the drivers. We've seen all the rumours about Alonso, but then we've seen what could happen if Alonso does decide to go. Who could replace him is going to be Lando Norris, isn't it? So it's very telling times for McLaren. I feel this is probably, if last year was a pivotal season and the year before that was a pivotal season, this is a massive season. This really does need to be this season where they're actually going to come back and we could see them on the podium. But there's so many teams in and around that kind of position now where it's probably too tight to call. Renault themselves look pretty good. Red Bull themselves look good. We may even see a good old little chunk of a fight in the constructors between all these Renault-powered cars. That'd be quite weird to see, and it would probably, but it might happen. I don't disregard McLaren just yet. There's still something about them, I think.
Yeah, I think once they get up to speed, once they sort out the reliability issues, or rather limit them, because I can't really see them just becoming an ultra-reliable team this year. They've got so many problems in the past. I think that's going to take a while to rectify. But I think once they get everything working together, yeah, I do agree. I think they should be comfortably leading the midfield. Renault probably right behind them. But I think they are going to kind of pay possibly with that unreliability once again. So, Casey, where do you kind of see this kind of McLaren versus Renault fight happening? Do you think those two will be the kind of the forefront of the midfield behind the big three?
Yeah, I think they probably will be. But I'd say that McLaren have timed this engine change at completely the wrong time by the looks of it, because for the past couple of years there's been a real big gap between the top three, and then to Force India in fourth there's been a massive gap that you could put a car into easily. But now McLaren, you would say, would be the fourth quickest team, but they've got a lot of challenge from Renault and also Haas as well, who had a fantastic testing. I know testing doesn't really matter that much, but it's really hard to ignore it when Haas were doing as well as they were. So I think that they probably will end up being the top of the midfield. I agree with that. But it's going to be a lot tougher for them than you would imagine. Going into the season, a lot of people thought, oh yeah, they'll have an easy fourth, not any challenge. But yeah, from what we've seen so far, I think Renault and Haas as well, and probably Force India as well, could be pretty close. So it's going to be tough for them, but I think that they can manage it, especially with Alonso as well.
Yeah, we mustn't count out Force India, I think, in all this. It's so easy to write them off after testing. Obviously, they do have a new car. It is going to be tough. It looks like this name change might be delayed for a year. But, I think it's pretty crucial to not write them off, because they always kind of find a way to basically defy everyone's expectations. I'm not saying they're going to finish fourth this year. They probably won't. But I think they're really going to give McLaren and Renault a really good run for the money, keep them on the toes. And that kind of driver lineup and that reliable Mercedes engine in the back, that's the kind of team that could really surprise us in it this year. James Bacon, also I guess of course Haas as well, which we mentioned, who look pretty good at testing, and maybe a team like that really has to capitalise on their early season results while Renault and McLaren are still getting their act together.
Absolutely, they always do. And if we're going to go look into the Australian Grand Prix, there is always that chance of a freak result. Now, people could say that Haas may be finishing quite well in Australia. I wouldn't say is off the cards. You're right to say testing is, we can't read too much into it. You can read so much into it, but not an awful lot. I agree that, I've seen, we've heard from Mercedes. We've seen interviews, and they've said how actually they don't actually look that bad a team this year, Haas. So kind of good to see. I think, to be honest, I don't think it'll be Haas that will be the problem, like in terms of the team. I think it's probably the drivers they've got and whether they can actually keep it together. Because there's always little things, I think, with those two drivers that just almost puts them off, potentially. There's just something about them. And in terms of them against Force India, again, it's the same story, isn't it? They've got little disputes. I'm not really too sure, not more so Haas. There's more so Force India have their disputes, and we've seen it with Ocon and Perez. But they need to act like a team now, these two, because they have got. You're right. They do have a massive chance going into this season. But if Mercedes is promising so much from testing, and it doesn't look like they've got a brilliant engine, I'm sure Force India can't be discarded yet again. They've got to. This has got to be podiums year for Force India. There's so much expectation on a lot of teams this year, and Force India really does need to match those standards. So, yeah, it's definitely one to watch for Force India, but it should be podiums this year, I think, for them.
That's quite surprising, actually. I thought, just with Renault and McLaren having better resources, that maybe they kind of naturally would go ahead, and maybe sixth wouldn't be a disappointment in constructors. James Casey just bringing you in. What do you think on Force India's expectations for this year?
Yeah, I think that they've been really happy with fourth over the last 2 years. I think that they've realised that they've been massively overachieving. So I don't think that they'll be too disappointed if they were to drop down a little bit, but they'll want to remain in that kind of fight. They don't want to be dropping backwards, because that's just a little bit. No team obviously wants to go backwards, so they'll be a little bit disappointed, but I think that they'll be happy, with sixth if they can remain in that kind of area, just as long as they aren't too far behind.
Yeah, and I think Haas as well. They're another team, but like you said, James Baker, they do need to start delivering a bit more. I think last year they tended to have a pretty good car when it was working, but they just didn't seem to be able to get into the operating window. As you said, the drivers were a bit hit and miss as well. So yeah, they definitely need a strong start to the year. Someone else who's having quite a strong start to the year, or in testing, was Toro Rosso. We mentioned Honda had pretty good reliability, and yeah, James Baker, I think your thoughts on Toro Rosso?
I like Toro Rosso as a team. I think it's totally different from what it was. It just seems like a whole new team. It just seems so different. They've got the new Honda power unit. It's even little things. I've looked on their social media. It just seems so different in the way that they're kind of approaching everything. I like the way that they've got their drive lineup as well. Actually, a lot of people come into criticism of that and maybe say, Red Bull haven't got enough junior drivers and stuff like that. Pierre Gasly, we can't rule him out. He's meant to be the next big thing, I think. He's a fantastic driver. Something to prove there, I think, for him. And if this Honda engine is as good as people, maybe in terms of reliability, if it's a lot better than last year, it definitely seems that way during testing. They absolutely, in fact, to be fair, they probably had one of the best tests they've ever had, Toro Rosso. It was such a good test for them. I mean, it's probably gone under the radar a little bit because it's been overshadowed for how poorly McLaren have been and whether they've made the wrong decision. But I like that team and the fact that I was genuinely believing that they would finish probably bottom of the constructors this year. I don't think that anymore. There's something about it that just makes me think, actually, this Honda engine might have actually made strides. Really annoyingly, of course, if you're a McLaren fan. It's now, of course, can Brendan Hartley as well. Something about that driver lineup. It just works. I think it's like, don't know what it is, but Hartley's now got to prove himself and how good he can be. And of course, he's won Le Mans, so we know how good he can be. He just needs to show us what he can do in a Formula One car. And he's experienced. He'll know what he's doing. So it'll be good to see, I think, just how that team rises this year. Hopefully, it does rise as well.
Yeah, thank you for positivity as well, because some people seem to be a bit, kind of lukewarm on the driver lineup, kind of writing Gasly and Hartley off. So it's good to hear some optimism about them, because I guess everyone has a point to prove, don't they? Toro Rosso kind of a bit of a point to prove. Honda, of course, definitely do. Brendan Hartley does, in the fact that obviously he was dropped from Red Bull earlier in his career and hasn't now got the second chance. Gasly had to wait ages for his chance. So Casey, it just kind of put them up as a bit of a nice surprise package with plenty to prove.
Yeah, I think that. James obviously was touching on the fact that the team has changed, and for me, I think that this season marks a real big change in terms of it's not so much about driver development now, but it's about kind of engine development.
Yeah.
Now there is just that team to test the Honda engine for the Red Bull, and I think that's partly why they've gone. with Brendan Hartley as a driver, that great experience that he's got working obviously with hybrid engines with a big manufacturer like Porsche in the World Endurance Championship. So I think that change has helped, given that experience. I know he's not an experienced Formula One driver, but he's experienced in terms of his relationship with the manufacturer. And I think that's going to be crucial for them. I don't think Brendan Hartley is the quickest driver that they could have put into that car, but I think that what he will do in terms of development is going to be really crucial, and Pierre Gasly should be another solid addition to that team. So yeah, I think that this season is a lot different for Toro Rosso from previous times, and yeah, I think it's going to be a good season for them. Will take time to develop over the season, I think, but they could be on for some pretty solid results.
Right, let's halt the positivity because we need to talk about the British team who used to win World Championships, who Pastor Maldonado won a Grand Prix with, and now head into 2018, not in the best shape, with plenty of criticism flying around, between Sirotkin, signing of him, Lance Stroll, of course, continuation with the team, Robert Kubica, of course, in the reserve role for this year. Baker, what can we expect from Williams this year?
It's a really annoying one, isn't it, Williams? It's just something. Everyone poses the questions. You've got the wrong driver lineup. It was very much like that. You've got the philosophy right. You see too much of it. Now, I don't disagree that potentially they have made a slight error in the driver lineup, but I don't think any more that Kubica should have got that seat than Sirotkin, to be honest. I mean, a lot of people put the poise and they said, yes, it'd be great to see Kubica back. I don't know why we're not doing it. There is quite an obvious reason why we're not doing it. It's because he hasn't driven a Formula One car for so long. Nor's Sirotkin. So to be honest, they were on evil playing fields. Paul di Resta, he was in the mix, and he's exactly the same as well. They really never had like a proper replacement for Felipe Massa. Lance Stroll, he's in this seat right now, and to be honest, yet again, he's got to prove himself, and he's got to show that he can lead the team now in front of a guy that, like Sergei Sirotkin. Like, there's nothing wrong with Sirotkin potentially as a driver. It's just maybe people were looking at it as maybe did he earn it? Did he deserve to get that seat? Like, was there better drivers out there that they could have gone to? I mean, previous years, they, like in 2015 or 16, I believe, they were looking at the more experienced market. They were looking at your Jenson Buttons, for example. They were looking at drivers like that. But not for this year, and it's a shame to see Williams like this, because they've always done well when they've had a South American driver, and this year they don't have one of those. So it's very weird. You see previous years, they've had Massa and Maldonado and Barrichello and all these names, and now we're stuck with Sergei Sirotkin and Robert Kubica. It would be great to see Robert Kubica making a few practice sessions this year. It wouldn't surprise me if he does, but something about that team at the moment, they could, bear in mind, let's go to the devil's advocate side, they could well actually swing a massive surprise, and they might be quite good this year. But it's so unlikely. They probably, if they're really unlucky, I reckon they could be very near the bottom of the championship this year. Maybe even bottom. They're not looking good shape at all.
I've got a bit more optimism, but certainly you're not alone in that view. Definitely, I think that seems to be the general kind of mood. But I think that there is something there. I think the car they've designed this year. I'm no technical expert whatsoever. It's just from what I've basically read. But I think that their kind of philosophy and what they've gone for is a very aggressive one, a very unique one. And I think there could be a lot of pace in that car. They seem to have gone fairly ambitious, but I think it's going to be very difficult to extract that pace, certainly early on, and certainly with such inexperienced drivers. So I think they could actually spring some really decent results later on in the season. But I think, as you kind of alluded to, the inconsistencies are going to be there with such an inexperienced lineup. But I think there could be a bit of pace there. I fully expect Sirotkin to beat Stroll, even with Stroll's year of experience, even though Stroll's a European Formula 3 champion. Who rates Sirotkin? I think both of them struggle for consistency. Sirotkin kind of did through his junior Formula career. You kind of look at the start of the 2016 GP2 season. He threw away, 2 race wins basically in the first 2 rounds. But other than that, he's very talented, very, very quick, has an engineering degree, seems to be integrating himself in the team very well. So there's potential there. But like you say, it's just a bit messy, and it's not an ideal situation compared to previous years. a shame Pascal Wehrlein isn't on the grid this year. And really, he should have been chosen, but of course, without him bringing any backing, Mercedes seemed to have basically cut ties with him. Apart from, he's still employed by Mercedes, but it seems like they weren't willing to put the kind of hand in the pocket. So, yeah, that bit's a shame, but I think there is some optimism there. James Casey, can you shed any more optimism on, or have you got any more negatives?
No, I'm generally quite positive. I'm setting expectations quite low, but I could be optimistic of, like you say, about the car. It looks really aggressive. When I first saw it, I thought, oh, that could be really quick, actually. And obviously, Paddy Lowe's involved now, who's had a fair bit of success. So there is that chance of them doing well, but what we've seen so far hasn't been too great for them. So, yeah, I think that car will take a long time to dial in. Something that if they had Felipe Massa still in the team, they could probably do a lot quicker. So I'm surprised that they didn't keep on to Massa. But in the same respect, I think Sorokin's actually an okay pick. I think, as you say, Wehrlein might have been the better pick, but I don't know if Sorokin is a respectable driver. And obviously he does bring in that money, but by no means is he some kind of terrible driver like some HRT drivers that we've had in the past to to just think about that. So yeah, I think that again they're going to be one that maybe later in the season we see more from them as they get that car dialed in. With regards to Lance Stroll, he's just got to get his qualifying right. He's a good racer. Last year I thought that if you took just the races, it would have been a really impressive rookie season. But his qualifying was just disastrous, and that really needs to be improved, especially if overtaking gets even harder this year with more and more aero being put onto these cars.
And let's just round it off then with the last team, I think, where we get to talk about that. It's, of course, Sauber, Marcus Ericsson and Charles Leclerc, their drivers. Leclerc, of course, a Formula 2 Formula 2 champion. And obviously Ericsson been with the team for quite a while now. So disappointing testing, possibly?
Disappointing. I wouldn't say disappointing. I mean, I like the idea that they've got Alfa Romeo in Formula One. I love that idea. It's they needed that. I think Sauber, to be honest, they needed Alfa Romeo with them. But driver lineup, probably not what a lot of people expected that they kept Ericsson. I don't know how he keeps getting seats. A lot of people share that opinion because, in all due respect, ever since he's been in Formula One, now this could be a very unpopular opinion, but what's he done? He hasn't achieved anything. He hasn't gone for anything. He's never really got any points. He's just sat there. He's just deadwood. He was
battling Hamilton in Mexico last year. Don't forget that.
Yeah, I know, but it wasn't. I just so poor. Like Leclerc, if I'm going to be honest, first year, he should be wiping the floor with him. To be honest, Ericsson getting these seats is near a joke now. Like it's almost like they can't get anybody else out. But with that Alfa Romeo back, I'd like to think that potentially now next season they may be able to. I like the look of the team. Like I say, they've got Calderon in the test drive, the reserve driver.
Yeah.
Nice to see. Maybe she will get some practice sessions this year. And that would be good to see. To be honest, what would even be even better than that is if she kicked Ericsson out of a seat. That would be, I'm so negative on Ericsson, and there's so many positives on that team, but it's that driver that just like, Q1's near. It might just be that kind of year where they just won't get out of Q1. They've got a good engine though now. I mean, Ferrari pretty sure last year they had like a 2016 Ferrari engine in that car.
Yeah.
And now this year they've got apparently a B-spec Ferrari engine, whatever the hell. So they should be as good maybe as Haas, but they won't be. So I don't know, it's an if and but they got Vasseur in there as well, Frederick Vasseur. I do like him, to be honest. There's something about that man. He just seems, he's going to kick them basically at the backside and maybe kickstart that team again. And he has done plenty of other teams, but this one I think he might be able to as well. Not going to rule off Alfa Romeo at all, but it's a bit driver lineup. I don't know, just a bit dodgy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it should have been Antonio Giovinazzi. That would have been a very exciting lineup of Leclerc and Giovinazzi. Visser, as you mentioned, is obviously a great figure, I think, to have there. And he's got vast experience, of course, in junior Formula. So he's going to be one, I think, that's really going to encourage young talent to come through. And he'll probably prioritise that over, hopefully, drivers like Ericsson in the future once he's been kind of embedded in the team a little bit more. Financial considerations, I guess, of course. With Mark Ericsson, but yeah, like I say, I mean, even so, I'd have thought there'd been slightly better back drivers out there. But let's see what Ericsson can do. He's got a proper year now. He's got a proper car, you think, that should be capable, I think, of scoring points occasionally. I think they'll be on the back of the pack, but they should be close enough to get in amongst there. But I mean, this is looking like one of the tightest ever midfield fights, where no one is really about marker this year.
Yeah, that's exactly what we want to see. Obviously, the past few years, it's been we've obviously had the three new teams that are now all out of the sport, who are right at the back of the field, not really ever going to score any points. But yeah, now everyone is in contention for points, which is good to see. With regards to Alfa Romeo, I think that we've got to remember that they're still in a rebuilding phase in terms of the team being transferred over. Peter Sauber not in charge of it anymore, so they're still kind of getting there on that front. So I don't think that this year will be the year really for them. It will be about just having a solid year building into 2019, when hopefully that Alfa Romeo backing can really help them move up the grid. So yeah, but this season they should be better at least. So they will be in that fight a little bit more, but. I think them and Williams will be the teams towards the bottom, and I expect that Williams will probably outperform them.
Right, speaking of predictions, let's get our crystal balls out and let's predict the 2018 season. I hope you guys are ready, because we're going to jump straight in with our 2018 Drivers' Champion. I'm just going to be boring and say Hamilton, but I generally think it will be him. Baker, let's come to you first.
To be honest, I'm going to be that guy. I think I'm going to go for Vettel. Think about that.
Good, very good. Casey?
Yeah, well, I said Hamilton at the top of the show, didn't I? I think I'm going to stick with that. But I think that it's going to be very close. It's going to be tough for him, but I think that he's going to do it.
Anyone stop Mercedes winning?
In the constructors?
No.
No.
I mean, possibly.
No.
Okay, if Bottas does really badly, actually, which is a possibility, if he has like a mid-season that he had last year.
To be fair, though,
Yeah.
if you're going off that basis, then you've got to apply that Raikkonen does quite well, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Which is why I think Red Bull are more likely to win the constructors than Ferrari, in my opinion.
Yeah.
it'll be really tough for Red Bull, to be fair, but yeah.
Definitely, but let's see how this. I mean, some people are predicting they'll finish second. They'll have the second fastest car. Maybe Verstappen will be the one to challenge Hamilton this year. Let's wait and see. And then just a kind of final one about who is going to be driving for Mercedes in 2019. Hamilton and.
Well, definitely
I'm going to say Ricardo. Hamilton and Ricardo.
They seem quite loyal, so I think they're going to stay with Bottas, but it's going to be a late in the season decision.
Ooh.
They're going to keep us waiting.
Apologies. Right, so
You're polishing the crystal ball a bit more.
Yeah, Hamilton. Yeah, is very much polishing. No, Hamilton will definitely be alongside, but I can't really see Mercedes dropping Bottas after 2 years. Just something about that. I just don't know why. They just seem like that team that just won't do it. So
Yeah, no, I get you.
Probably just be Bottas. Massive anticlimax.
No, it's all right. Fair enough. I think that's pretty much it for our predictions, unless anyone else wants to throw in a surprise.
No. Should we go for Dark Horse?
Yeah, dark horse. I'll say Williams, considering I big them up so much.
Oh.
And Force India. There we go. Another two.
Well, I'm going for Renault. Renault will be.
I was going to say Renault. I'm going to say a driver, if that's allowed. I'm going to go with Stoffel Van Dorn. I reckon he's going to be a lot closer to Alonso than people thought. That's what I'm going to say.
Well, Alonso's going to be quite distracted as well, isn't he? He's going to be quite busy with all this.
Yes.
Keeping himself busy with all this racing this year. We'll see how that plays out. That's going to be exciting. I mean, we know that Alonso's going to have a race-winning car. We just don't know if it's going to be in the World Endurance and F1 or not.
Yeah.
It might be with
He will win a race this year. I'll make that prediction. I'm just not going to say it's going to be an F1 race. He'll definitely win one of the WEC rounds. It's a two-horse
He
race.
should.
A 1 in 2 chance, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a one, so you never know with his luck recently. But yeah, I think that pretty much rounds out our season preview. Hopefully, we're going to be in for a good season. Easy to say that Mercedes is going to go out and dominate, but Ferrari have sprung a surprise in the past. Never count out Red Bull. 2 great drivers there, as I mentioned. So hope you guys all enjoy the 2018 season. Get in touch with your predictions, your thoughts, your comments. But until next time, I've been Joshua Steele. Been joined by James Casey and James Baker. It's been a pleasure. Until next time.